Shalom, welcome to Rob on the Rock. I'm Rob Van Hoff, and for this week's Torah portion, we begin the Pentateuch. We begin what's called Parashat Bereshit, which is translated as in the beginning, usually. And I have two manuscripts to share with you, images from black and white images that help us to see clearly between the ink and the parchment from Qumran, Cave 4, and sadly they're damaged, but we can see here. So I'll start with image number 1. You see how you can kind of see it fragmentary here. You can see this must have been the beginning of a scroll, because do you see all this surviving margin here? In my view, that is the far right margin of a scroll. Now, did this contain the entire book of Genesis? We don't know. But I'll zoom in here, and you can see the beautiful margin up above as well. So in other words, the scribe started with this big piece of leather, and he gave it plenty of space here. And he begins writing the sacred words of the Torah. And what we see here is what we normally know to be the case here. Oops, let me make that visible for you. Bet, Resh, Aleph, Shin, and then we see a Yod here, and then it sadly it's torn, but we can see the Tav. Bereshit, Bara, and then we see the beginning of the word Elohim right here. So Bet, Resh, Aleph, Shin, Yod, Tav, like we saw the tear here. Bereshit, Bara, Bet, Resh, Aleph, nice space between the words. Aleph, Lamed, He, Yod. We know that there would be a mem there, Elohim. In the beginning, God created, and then it's broken. And then we see a little bit here, which is from the word merachefet, which says the Spirit of God hovering over the surface of the waters. And, oops, it's popping around on me here. And then we see here, tohu vavohu, etc. But the third line, Vayomer Elohim, again, it gets broken, obviously. So Vayomer, I'll write a little bit of that line. This is line 3. Vav, Yod, Aleph, Mem, Resh, Vayomer, and then we have Elohim, Yahi Or. So there you go, the words of God's creative fiat. Yod, He, Yod, Aleph, Vav, Resh. Yod, He, Yod, Aleph, Vav, Resh. Yahi Or. I'll write it over here. Let light be. Yahi Or. Isn't that nice? So sadly, this manuscript is very broken and it doesn't survive. We can note a few things about it that it seems like right here it says Vayhi Erev, right? Vav Yod He Yod Vayhi Erev Ayin Resh Bet, and it was evening and it was morning. Yom Echad was there, and then there was some sort of space, and then day 2 was given its own line, and then we can see here too that it says Yom Sheni here, Yod Vav Mem Shin Nun Yod, second day, and then a space. So we can see some of the, and appreciate some of the scribe's visual kind of sorting of the various days of creation in as he wrote out the text itself. But like I said, sadly, it's broken. There's one other point here before we go to the other one I want to show you here. Let's talk about the great lights. And you see here, there's a gimel written above. And what we see is the letter He. I'll copy it over on the side so you can see. Basically, it's a He, and then a Dalet, and then a Lamed, and then a Yod and a Mem. And then what the scribe realizes, he forgot a letter. Gedolim, the great lights, right? Gedolim. So he forgot the Gimel, and so he writes it up above. And that's what we're seeing right here. So a hey and then the gimel is to be read hagedolim. So instead of, like, one option, a scribe could learn right away they made a mistake and try to erase or scratch out and maybe start over again. He didn't do that. So my guess is that he discovered it maybe a little bit later, not immediately. Went back, or maybe another scribe noted it and wrote the gimel here. But in my view, it's probably the same scribe, and he recognized he forgot the gimel, and so he writes it gently above there. So that's one manuscript. I'll zoom back out and you can appreciate this. This might very well be, our oldest surviving fragment that actually has the whole word Bereshit in it. And notice it's not an extra big bet or anything like that. That's much, much later scribal convention. Okay, we're going to look at another one here that is... here we go. Let me see. Can I zoom in? Oh, yeah, I can. There we go. The Bereshit is blocked out. And it's kind of, we can see part of the bet, part of the resh, but you can see how it's faded and broken. Part of the aleph, part of the shin here. But then we continue on and we see Elohim is more clear. Aleph, lamed, he, yod, mem, et hashemayim, ve'et haaretz. So even though we lack the clarity of that initial word, Bereshit, we can tell in the same way. Look at all the margin above and all the margin to the right. We know this is the beginning of the book of Genesis, or at least part from the book of Genesis, maybe chapters 1 and 2. We just don't know what the entire context of this scribal product was. Then we see Ruach Elohim, so Reish Vav Chet, Ruach Elohim, Merachefet al Pnei Hamayim, hovering over the surface of the waters. And we get to see very clearly this is the text of what we call Genesis 1. There is another point that I want to share here. Well, first, notice Yom Echad right here, day 1, and then day 2 starts its own new line. Yom Sheni, right? Day 2 ends there, and then day 3, and on and on. So another, like the other fragment we looked at, a visual demarcation of the different days. So each day is given its own space on the page. And that's not a requirement, of course, but the scribe chose to do that. I want to just draw your attention to the end of I guess it's verse 5, because it's towards the end of the description of Yom Echad. It says Vayikra, and then there's a space here, and it could be because there was something, a natural blemish in the leather, and he didn't want to write Elohim over the top, but it's Vayikra Elohim. God called Leor. He called, sorry for the bounce around there. Vayikra Elohim Leor Yomam. And usually it says Ulochoshek Kara Laila. So God called the day, or called the light day, and the darkness he called night. But notice here it says Yomam. He called the day Yomam, which would be Yod, Vav, Mem, like that. Yomam. But our Masoretic text and all other textual witnesses just have the word Yom here, not Yomam. So this is a place where we have to question, was the scribe being very attentive? Why did he copy it this way? Of course, the word Yomam does occur in Scripture. We see it in Psalm 1, for example. Yomam valayla, daily and at night. In other words, meditation on God's Torah. So one, I guess, generous interpretation here would be that the scribe, by putting Yomam, and then certainly the word Lila, which does not survive here, but it would be over to the left, as a hint towards Psalm 1. That meditation on God's Torah day and night, that in the very first day when God gave light, he is giving what ultimately the Torah is called light. And so Yomam and Laila are hints to Psalm 1. That's that's something I thought of. I don't know if it's true or not, but it's something at least that could be possible. And aside from that, was there anything else? These are dated to these are probably both BC, like maybe in the 1st century BC, or maybe even 2nd century BC. It's hard to know. I'm not a specialist on all the scribal conventions and the way letters were written, but we do see here in both of these manuscripts very strong mem-sophites that do reflect 2nd century BC, such as the Isaiah scroll, which is written in 125, has this same kind of giant mem-sophite. And so these texts do share a little bit of that, but they're clearly by different scribes and it's a different ink. You can just tell that they have a completely different look to them. So they could be 100 years apart as far as I know. But they are both early attestations to the Hebrew text of Genesis. And there's all sorts of texts from the Hebrew Torah which have variants that are found in different manuscripts from Qumran, maybe ancient translations that have variances. But it would seem that when it comes to the beginning of the Torah, Genesis 1:1, there's no dispute as to what the verse was. Bereshit bara Elohim. In the beginning, God created et hashamayim ve'et haaretz. Now, of course, there's a lot of dispute as to the meaning of Bereshit bara. As Rashi and others have said, they read it as when God began to create the heavens and the earth. So they take it as a temporal clause when God began to create, not in the beginning God created. But in any event, for here we see these two early manuscripts of our Torah portion, Bereshit, from Qumran. And at least as far as Genesis 1:1 goes, it's exactly the same as found in the Masoretic tradition. Shalom.